Okay, it's finally here. Starnet++ built into Siril. I'm excited. I don't know about you guys, but this is a really cool feature. I've been wanting this for a while now. Again, we're looking at it in version 1.2.0 beta 1, and unfortunately on the Windows implementation only, there is a bug. It's minor. I'll show you how to work through it. It really streamlines the workflow to removing your stars and putting them back together. So we're gonna get into this. I'll show you how to use it, go through all the settings. My name is Rich, and you're watching Deep Space Astro. Okay, before you get started using the Starnet integration within Siril, you need to install the command line version of Starnet. And when I say command line version, I'm not talking about the version that you're seeing on your screen here. This is the GUI version, the graphical user interface. You can leave this one installed. It's not going to interfere with the command line one, but this is not the one that we need for this new feature to work. So we'll go over to starnetastro.com. And they're currently, at the time of recording, reworking their website, so this may look a little bit different by the time you guys watch this. But come over to the download section, and you want to scroll down and look for command line tool. This is the version that we need. I'm running on Windows, so I'm going to download the Windows version. Okay, once the download is done, I'm going to go over to my downloads folder, right click and extract all. And then I'm going to move this to a permanent location on my hard drive. So I'm just going to cut the extracted folder and paste it over on my C drive. You may get a message saying that you need admin rights in order to do this. Just click yes, and that's fine. There's no actual installation for the command line version. You're just downloading the zip file and extracting it and putting it on your hard drive someplace. Okay, so we have Starnet downloaded and ready to be used. There is a bug with Starnet right now where it won't run from the shortcut properly. So just to show you guys what I'm talking about, it's better to see it than just talk about it. I'm going to run Siril from the shortcut that the installation for the update created. And I'm going to open up one of my result.fit files. And we're going to come up to image processing, star processing, Starnet removal. We'll go over all this stuff in a minute. I'm just showing you the bug and how it exists in the current version, the current beta 1 version. And I hit execute, and you can see, boom, 890 milliseconds, it was done. If you've ever used Starnet before, you know that's just not true. That's the bug. If we come over into our working directory, it created just a Starnet result file, which is the same thing as our result file. There's no change to it. So it just duplicated this file, did not remove any stars, did not create our star mask. So I'm going to delete that file, and I'm going to show you the workaround that Siril has given us for this. We'll close Siril down. And if we go over to their website, and on the release notes, you can either access the release notes right here, or if you come over to downloads, you can select on the beta version. First bug that they list right here, and this is Windows only, it doesn't affect Mac or Linux. In order to get Starnet to work, you actually need to start Starnet from a command line, which is what I have highlighted right here. So you can either open up a command line and type that manually, or they've taken that command and put it into a batch file. So that's what we'll use here. Just right click on the batch file and say save link as. If you're in Chrome, there'll be something, it'll probably be labeled differently if you're using Edge or any other browser. But you want to right click and save that file. And I'm just going to save it right to my desktop. And there's the batch file. So I'm just going to double click the batch file. You'll get a warning that it's protecting your PC. Click on more info, and then run anyway. That's the command window running. Now I've closed this and everything seemed to work just fine with it closed. So it's up to you what you want to do. If you're going to close it and any issues arise with Starnet, then leave it open. I'm going to leave it open just to be safe and just minimize it down. So now the bug that I just demonstrated has effectively been squashed. They're going to be fixing this in the next beta release. So just watch the release notes when you get the notification for that, and they'll indicate that they fixed it or not. The next thing that we need to do is come over to our settings menu up here in the top right and go to preferences, come down to miscellaneous, and then right here where it says must point to a valid Starnet++ installation directory, you want to make sure that your directory where you put your copy of the command line version of Starnet is specified here. So I'll walk through it again. We'll hit other, and it'll bring up a window that we can browse through. So We copy that folder right to the root of my C drive. Right down here, Starnet 2 CLI _ win. I'm going to say select folder. So now it knows where the command line version of Starnet is. Click apply, and we're ready to start playing with the new tool. So I've already pre-processed and stacked my data of the Cygnus loop. So I am just going to open up that result and put it in the auto stretch so we can see what we have. So the first thing is, it's highly recommended that you do not do this on a stretched image. It should still be in its linear state. Not to say that you can't do it, but for the best results, no stretching before you remove the stars. So I'm going to go ahead and do a crop on this, a background extraction, and a photometric color calibration, and then I'm going to stop and come back and remove the stars. Okay, we're crop, background extracted, and color calibrated right now. So we're going to come up to image processing and star processing. So the first thing I want to point out is this menu is called star processing. It does not mean that everything in here is Starnet. Technically, only the first option is Starnet. The second one, star recomposition, is what we'll use to combine the starless and the star mask back together when we're done. And then desaturate stars and full resynthesis actually deserve their own video on how to use these two. So we're not going to be touching base on these two today. This is strictly a Starnet removal and recomposition video. So we'll start with Starnet removal, and you'll be presented with this box right here. So the first thing I want to point out is right down here it says a valid Starnet v2 executable has been found, right? If you did not set your path like I showed you previously, it'll say right here that it has not found your executable file. So there's a nice little validation that you've got everything configured properly. Getting back to the recommended way is not to stretch your data before you run Starnet. The caveat to that is Starnet wants at least a light stretch to be performed so it can detect the stars easier. So that's what this first option is, pre-stretched linear image. So we're going to select that. So Siril will apply a slight stretch to it. We're going to leave the generate star mask selected. This will create just our star mask file, and we're going to select recompose stars on completion. Now I'm starting with this because my opinion, this is just me speaking, this is not the best way to use the tool, and I'll show you why. So the recompose stars on completion is going to do is, once it creates your starless image and once it creates your star mask, it's going to open up the recomposition tool so you can blend those back together. You know, if you think about it, I'm removing the stars and now I'm saying that I immediately want to put them back together. So there are some use cases for it, but I just wanted to show you that you can do it this way. For my workflow, this is not what I would be doing, but let's demo it right now so you guys get an idea what I'm talking about. Before we hit execute, we'll go over some of these other options. The apply to sequence. If you had a sequence of files loaded, you could remove the stars from each of your individual light frames before you actually stack them. So if you're a viewer of the channel, you probably are thinking now about my comet video where we use a Python script to do just that. The script allowed us to remove the stars from all of the images before we stack the comet. That's kind of the old way now, even though the video is only about a month old, if that. You'd be able to do that process all within Siril now without needing to jump out and use the Python script. Upsample 2 will do just that, right? It'll upsample your image by 2, and the use case for that is if some of the stars are just like really small, really tight, and maybe Starnet has an issue removing those smaller, tighter stars like that, you can upsample your image. It will add a considerable amount of time to the whole process, because it's going to scale it up to twice the size. It's going to remove the stars, and then when it's done, it's going to scale it back down to the original size for you. Use custom stride even on Starnet's website for any version of Starnet, whether it's the command line or the Windows version. They just recommend flat out leave it set. The default, if you were to tick this, is 256. You can change it, but there is really not too many reasons you would need to do it. The 256, it chunks your image out. And so there'll be 256 chunks that it looks at to look for the stars to extract them. If you make that number lower, now you just increase the number of chunks that are across the image. And again, it would add a considerable amount of time to the whole star removal process. So we don't need to apply to sequence, obviously. We're just working on one image. We're not going to upsample, and we're not going to change our stride rate. We're just going to do a slight pre-stretch. We're going to bring up the recomposition window when it's done, and we're telling it to generate a star mask for us. So hit execute. And again, because of the bug, you'll get this command line that comes up. I believe because we ran this from a batch file, that's why this window comes up. So when they patch it, I would not expect this to happen anymore. But if you come down here in the bottom right, you can see it says running Starnet. So that's your progress. That's where you watch where things are at. And once this process is done, this command line window will close automatically. Okay, Starnet has completed, and because we're still in auto stretch, that's what we're seeing in the background here. So we're going to come back over and change this to linear. And this is the reason why I'm saying it's not going to be part of my workflow to have the star recomposition window come up automatically after it removes the stars, because neither one of them are stretched. So yes, I can come in here and I can start my stretching, get that histogram over, and we'll see it reflected in the image back here. Right, and then you can see, you know, a little bit of the stars showing up. Now I can come over to the right side under the star stretch parameters, and I can start stretching my stars. And I can bring them in as heavy or as light as I want. So really cool, right? But then that also means I've got to work and stretch all within this window. There are advanced settings if you hit this button down here that comes up with your shadow protection point and your highlight protection point and your black points. But the issue is you know, when you're stretching, that's generally an iterative process, right? You want to stretch a little bit, apply it, come back and do it again. If you're going to do all your stretching in this recomposition tool, then when I hit apply, it closes it, right? So now I can't bring that back up. I can come back to star processing and go back into the recomposition tools, but my two files aren't loaded. I can load them back up. I can come over here and grab my starless, and I can come over here and grab my star mask, but now I'm back to square one again. So what that means is if you do the stretching within the recomposition tool, you're done, and yeah, you can come back in and start doing stretching with, you know, the ass sign or the histogram or the new generalized hyperbolic stretch, but now you're stretching your stars too, which the whole purpose of removing the stars is to leave them alone while you're working on your nebula or your galaxy. I hope that makes sense.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So the way that my workflow is I'll open up my result file, come up to image processing, star processing, and then Starnet removal. And I'm going to delete the files that it created so we have nice clean files. So these are the two files that the Starnet routine created for us. I'm just going to delete those. So when this comes up, I just hit pre-stretch linear image and generate star mask. I don't select the recompose stars on completion option. Hit execute, and we'll let that go as well, and then we'll come back and show you the rest of my process using this tool. So while this is running, I should also mention too, obviously we're working with a color image. If you're shooting mono, they recommend that you create a composite from your mono images, from your RGB or whatever it is that you're shooting, and not remove the stars from each of the channels that you've shot. So once this is finished, again, this window will close. It'll open up our starless version of the Cygnus loop for us to begin processing. And there is our starless version of the Cygnus loop. As you can tell, you can faintly see the nebulosity, and that's that light stretch, that pre-stretch that we initiated before we started the process. So at this point, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do my stretching and, you know, my workflow for the most part that I've shown in my beginner's tutorial. I'm not going to sit here and do that through here because, again, this is about removing the stars from the images, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. I did some quick stretching and up the saturation, remove the green noise, all the normal things that we usually do. I am also going to, just to demonstrate this, come over and save this as a TIFF file, because I usually like to take the images into Photoshop and do some work in there as well. So we're going to save this as a TIFF, 16-bit format, and save. So now we have our two fit files that were created by the tool, our starless result and our star mask result. And then I also have the starless result in TIFF format. I'm not going to jump into Photoshop right now. I just wanted to create the TIFF file to show you that the recomposition tool does not support TIFFs. So at this point, let's call this image done, and I'm ready to add the stars back in, but I want to bring in my TIFF file. So I'm going to go to image processing, star recomposition, and I'm going to go and I'm going to grab my TIFF file that I just saved out and did some changes in Photoshop. and click open. Error, image cannot be loaded. Again, they don't support TIFFs. It has to be a fit. So what do you do in this case? Cancel back out. Siril will open your TIFF file for you. So we're going to come over and hit open up the TIFF file, and then back over here to our save, and we're going to specify the fit file. So it's going to convert the TIFF back into a fit for us. It says I already have a file named that's fine, and say replace. You want to go back to 32-bit when you do this, because the star composition tool, as well as other things like pixel math, have to be 32-bit in order for you to be able to use them. So we'll click save. So now if I come over to image processing, star recomposition, and I open up my starless fit file, it opens without issue. So that's it in the background. Now we'll come over here on the right hand side under star stretch parameters, and we're going to pick our star mask. Okay, again, you should be able to see it in the video. You can see little indications of the stars because the star mask isn't stretched. Our starless is, because we went and we processed that ourselves. Now you can do some final stretching in here as final touch-ups, and that's why I say I recommend doing it this way. I wouldn't do all of my stretching right within the recomposition tool. So we're just going to come over to our stretch factor and just start bumping this over while we're watching our screen and watching the stars come back in. I mean, if we take it all the way over, if you really like stars, there you go. You have all the stars you could possibly want.
Oh, look at all those stars.
But obviously we're not going to do that. So we're going to back this down, and you can play around with it. You have local stretch intensity. All these controls, including the ones you see when you hit the advanced button, this is the same thing as the new functions that we have up here for our generalized hyperbolic stretch transformations, another new feature that they provided in the beta release. I'm not going to go into how all these controls work, because again, this is about Starnet in this video. I will be putting another video out going through the GHS stuff, which will carry over to here. The one thing that I will say about the generalized hyperbolic transform function within the recomposition tool is you can't select your symmetry point by simply clicking on the histogram graph. When you use the tool from over here, you can. They give you two ways of doing it, right? So you can come over and you can draw an area of the nebulosity where you want your S-curve, that symmetry point of your S-curve to land, and hit your little eyedropper tool, and then you can start stretching from there. But you can't set that symmetry point from the graphs up here. Don't know if they're going to implement it in the future, but right now that's not possible. So again, I'm not going to get into that stuff right now. We'll cover it in another video as far as the stretching is concerned. All I've been doing with putting the stars back in is leaving everything at default and just playing with the stretch factor. You can obviously do more with the sliders and see what kind of results you get. Just play with the settings they give you in the simple mode to get your stars added back in. And you know, this is a great way of being able to make your stars not only smaller and more pinpoint, but you can even take some of them out. If you just wanted a sprinkling of the stars in there, you move this thing down, you can see what it's doing right now. It's really super cool. So get it to where you like it, and we'll just land it like right about there, I think. Again, if you, as you're doing this, sometimes the image will maybe look a little bit darker because we put the star mask on top of it. You can do some final stretching, right? This is where I think this comes in handy. Again, not to be used as all of the initial stretching that you would do normally, but if you wanted to come back in and just do an overall stretch and brighten things up a little bit more, it's just stretching our starless version. It's not stretching our star mask version. So you have two separate controls for both images. Once you're happy, click apply, and that's your final image. Note up here, it says unsaved star recomposition results. So that means if you close right now without saving, you just lost all your work. So come back over to your save button. We'll just call this Cygnus file, and I'll just send it out as a TIFF. You could do JPEG, any of the other file formats that are listed down here, and click save and save. So as a final note, if you're a user of Starnet in the past, you probably are already aware, and I've mentioned it in my other videos, Whether it's the command line or it's the GUI interface, these files that you input into the program need to be 16-bit and they need to be a TIFF, right? So you're probably kind of wondering how this all works. That's Siril. That's their implementation of this stuff. They are doing all the conversions that you need to have done to make this successful. So it is taking the fit in the background, it is taking the fit, converting it into a 16-bit TIFF, running it through Starnet. When Starnet's done with it, it's taking it and it's converting it back to a 32-bit fit for you to use within Siril itself. Right? So everything's automated, done in the background. So that's Siril's implementation of Starnet++. I know a lot of us have been waiting for it for a while. No longer do we have to jump outside of the program and run it separately to go through all those processes. And I tell you, that star recomposition tool really puts this feature over the top. Try it out. Let me know what you guys think. Drop me a comment. Like the video if you found it helpful. Appreciate everybody's time. We'll see you in the next video, and clear skies.